tell us about your apostolate. You have an apostolate and a website, ourpatron.net.
Yeah.
Give us some of the info.
So, like I said, I was discerning religious life.
Mhm.
I was discerning who God wanted me to follow, as it were. Who is my patron?
Right.
And I discerned with two Franciscan communities. One was Capuchin, the other was a spin-off of the Conventuals, which lived more of a St. Maximilian Kolbe. They're the Franciscans of the Immaculate. And then I also discerned with a Maronite contemplative cloistered community. And and then also I was part of a men's group that was learning the spirituality of Saint Teresa, the Child Jesus. And nothing seemed to click. And I the way I describe it is, I got an invitation, as it were, through prayer. I was I was at work. I had a delivery job, and I was praying my rosary as I always did, as long as I knew where I was going.
Mhm.
And I felt the presence of Saint Joseph come to me and ask me if I would be willing to learn about him. And that was
Wow.
really the beginning of all of this. But then there was also the presence of Our Lady, and I felt her ask me if I'd be willing to love her as Saint Joseph did. And then I felt the presence of the communion of saints. They love all of us, but I felt them share their love for me. And at the time, I was also praying like Saint Therese, who would pray, to all the saints to give her, a million times their spirit. So
Mhm.
I would pray in that way too. And to me, the whole thing was, and I came to grow in this over time, to grow in my understanding and appreciation of what I call St. Joseph's place in the Earthly Trinity. And it's a build upon, because while I was discerning, especially with the Franciscans of the Immaculate, and I was also studying St. Louis de Montfort's writings. So consecration to Our Lady was very big in my life, and so the whole idea of to Jesus through Mary.
Right.
And so what basically was, I believe, given to me was an appreciation to Jesus and Mary in the spirit of Saint Joseph,
Mhm.
understanding, the third, his place, as the third person of the earthly Trinity. Of course, Jesus being the first person, Mary being the second. And so basically, this apostolate is about that. It's about bringing to light, as it were, Saint Joseph's place in the earthly Trinity as patron of the church and model of devotion to Mary. Pope Benedict XV, and for the 50th anniversary of Saint Joseph being proclaimed patron of the church, he had this document, he wrote this document back in 1920, and I might abuse the pronunciation, but it's like Bonum Sanae. And in it, he says, the English translation is, in fact, through Joseph we go directly to Mary, and through Mary to the origin of all holiness, Jesus. And the
Yeah.
second part of it, he says, who sanctified the domestic virtues by his obedience to Saint Joseph and Mary. And so I modified that, because originally he's talking about Joseph and Mary married to Jesus, and I'm like,
Mhm.
well, in keeping consistent with that, not looking at it as just imitating Jesus and loving our parents, but really loving Joseph and Mary. So I modify that and saying, and again, this is also an extension of creation, because people who promote devotion to Our Lady said, we are to be devoted to Our Lady in imitation of Jesus. And I said, well, you're talking about that. You're also talking about Saint Joseph.
Yeah.
And so, my modification is, who consecrated devotion to both Joseph and Mary by his obedience to them. And that's really, why the word both is in there, because, again, this is a build upon. Father Stanley had written a paper for the Seventh International Symposium on St. Joseph back in 1996, seeing the work that I was doing, but also seeing some other apostolates that were promoting St. Joseph as model of husband and father.
Mhm.
It was entitled St. Joseph's Place in the Third Millennium. And, he saw it in the first millennium, it was all about, Jesus and the church, the dogmas defending, Christ and who he truly is. But then he saw in the second millennia an increase in understanding and appreciation of the role of Our Lady. The great Marian saints, the Marian dogmas, cathedrals raised in her honor, etc.
Yeah.
And he was prophesying that he saw the third millennia being, an age of Saint Joseph, as it were. And I think we could all testify to that, we see that. I see that in your work. We see that in what Father Calloway did. Pope Francis, naming, 2020 to 2021, the year of Saint Joseph,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Absolutely. His time is now, and it's obvious by looking at the world why God kind of reserved him for our times, because more than ever, we need that father figure. We need that man of the house. We have to know how to be chaste men. I wanted to ask you, do you have any favorite prayers or devotions to Saint Joseph?
you know of my litany to litany of the Earthly Trinity,
Yes,
and
I do.
that really it's my favorite prayer. Because it's a meditation and it's also an intercessory prayer, but to the three, and that's it's the way I look at devotion to Saint Joseph. I don't separate him, as it were, and I think overall anybody who has devotion to any saint, you can't just isolate them. They're not islands.
Mhm.
It's all about their relationship to our Lord, and for some, also through Our Lady, explicitly. Um, so like you said, to me, it's like every time I pray the litany, it just, we sometimes people talk about centering prayer, and it's like this prayer always brings me home.
Mhm.
If my mind or my activity has wandered, this always brings me back and keeps me, focused on them, which I truly value.
Well,
So,
it is a very powerful litany, and the amount of reflection and meditation that happens while you're praying it, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's not just a dry litany. It's
no,
something that you have to invest yourself in when you're praying it. And it's it's just so inspiring and so theological. Like I love it.
yeah,
So
well, thanks be to God. Thanks be to
yes.
God. Yes.
So I'm glad that you came up with that.